morning. On behalf of the Glencoe Public Library, I welcome you to tonight's webinar on the secrets of the North Shore with Ellen Schubart. I am pleased to introduce her. She is a Chicago resident now, but Ellen lived in Glencoe for 40 years and, among other civic positions, served as the chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission and as a village board member for 8 years. Her career spans working as a teacher, a journalist, and a sustainable city planner advocate. An historian by training with master's degrees in U.S. history and historic preservation, she's also the author of What's with Chicago, Chicago and Illustrated Timeline, Images of America, Images of America, Glencoe, Illinois, and Taylor Street, Chicago's Little Italy. In retirement, she's a docent with the Chicago Architecture Center. Ellen, I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, thanks very much, Grace. And I hope everybody can see the picture. This is the garden, the Eklund Garden of the Glencoe Historical Society. And I'm using it to welcome you because I want to talk about a book that I just wrote called Secret North Shore Chicago. And I want to make it clear what's secret to me may not be secret to you. What's secret to you may not be secret to somebody who lives in another town. So essentially what this is 84 different unique places to visit and explore along Chicago's North Shore. I use the 8 suburbs that abut Lake Michigan plus 5 others that feed into it either, well, mostly governmentally, so that you have from Evanston to Lake Bluff, and then over in the second tier, you'll find Deerfield, Northfield, Glenview, Northbrook, and that adds up to the 13 suburbs. It's covering areas that are art and architecture. There's a lot of architecture in there because that's my thing: geography, history, natural sites, and museums. What is exactly the North Shore? I mean, you live there, most of you, I'm sure, who are watching, but it's a word used to talk about the municipalities that abut Lake Michigan, and the word North Shore gets into our literature in the 1890s when there's something called the North Shore Improvement Association, which is a group of people who want to have a road running from Evanston all the way up to Fort Sheridan. That name then is used again in 1906 when what used to be called the Sanitary District, today is the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. The Sanitary District put in its canal, and they called it the North Shore Canal. By 1916, the railroad took a name, the Chicago North Shore and Milwaukee. And so today, in 2024, it's an affluent residential area. It goes from Chicago's city limits to just south of the Wisconsin-Illinois border. And as you can see on this very colorful 1920s ad for the North Shore line, it is densely blue or green. And I think that says something about the shore today. It's either along the lake and influenced by the lake, or it's green under the trees in the various municipalities. So on a map, this is what you see: Deerfield, Northbrook, Northfield, Glenview. I did not include Skokie, but that the rest of the towns all belong to the North Shore. Now, by the numbers in the book, the subtitle of the book is The Weird, the Wonderful, and the Obscure. There are 16 that I consider to be weird, 16 obscure, 36 that are wonderful. I'm more involved in the beauty of the wonder. But there's also 11 of them that I would consider to be natural sites that I think are unique to the North Shore. And then there are 5 places that I talk about where you can get something to eat. Just real quick in the circle around the pictures, it's the Mitchell Museum of the American Indian in Evanston, the Actors Studio, which is a circus performing Academy in Evanston. That beautiful swath of land is the Techni Conservation Area. Coming down the side on the right, the building that has the banner 150 years is the Grosse Pointe Village Hall. Gutenberg is a little sculpture on the Tech building among many sculptures there done by Edgar Miller. The big building on the bottom is the Jewish Reconstructionist Temple in Evanston, which is a sustainable building. And the last one is the church at Techni. So the weird, what do I mean by weird? Different, odd, silly, eerie, ghostly, unusual. So the first thing is a ghost. And this is the ghost story. It's the story of the ghost in the furnace. Elfrida Knack, in October 1928, was found with her arms and legs burned in front of the furnace at Lake Bluff Village Hall. So on the left, the picture is of the Museum of the Lake Bluff Historical Society. It is connected to the Lake Bluff Library in downtown Lake Bluff. The middle picture is Village Hall, where Elfrida was found. And on the right-hand side is at the Historical Society Museum. This is all the artifacts talking about Elfrida, who's the woman on the desk picture. Her arms and legs were burned. She was a school teacher in the community. She refused to tell anybody what happened, and she died 3 days after they found her in her condition. She never revealed who was the one who pushed her into the furnace. There is a book now out all about this and with some guesses as to what's going on. But the Lake Bluff Historical Society has a ghost tour. They celebrate ghosts, particularly Elfrida, who supposedly still haunts the Lake Bluff Village Hall. Techni is a weird story. Techni is a place where the missionaries of the Divine Word set up their seminary. They came here in 1896. They were mostly German missionaries who went all over the world teaching the gospel. They had their own area, including their own post office. And the fun thing about this is that every year until 1989, when there were these real quick polls taken as to which were the richest communities in the nation, on the North Shore, one would have expected that the richest people would have been in Lake Forest or Glencoe or Winnetka, but no, they were always in Techni, because the pollsters who didn't know much about what was going on took the wealth of the church and divided it among the few numbers of monks. Ergo, they became the richest. Of course, they never had that kind of money to spend. It belonged to the church. But the post office still sticks in Techni at 60082. Techni, however, was annexed to Northbrook, and today it's a neighborhood in Northbrook. Roadways and transportation. One of the more interesting things about the North Shore is that the big highway, the Edens Expressway that goes through the North Shore, has no billboards on it. Why is that? Well, there are laws now about having billboards in residential areas, or not having billboards in residential areas, but this precluded all of these. The Edens Parkway, as it was called, was built in 1951, and it predates the Eisenhower Interstate Expressway laws of the mid-1950s. As the road goes through, the Chicago-affiliated Illinois Garden Club ladies went out and got each of the communities along the route to vote in regulations that precluded what they called nuisance placards or billboards. Ergo, to this day, there are no billboards in the Edens Expressway. Number 2 is Sheridan Road. As I mentioned, this is the 1889 North Shore Improvement Association's effort. They were formed after the Haymarket affair in Chicago, when they had to bring in troops to deal with what was going on, which at that time was called a riot. And there was no military highway. So they were trying to get a military highway all the way through 1900, when the federal government finally said, no, it's not going to be a military highway. But they thought, we still need a road through it. And so the actual Sheridan Road is not developed until the 1920s. And instead of being a military highway, it's a winding, serpentine, curvy, ravine-filled, gorgeous, beautiful route to take on in this case, fall day. The last thing we have is the below grade tracks in Winnetka. In 1937, there was another death. There had been many at the train tracks that were at grade level, and the village said that was enough. They were going to sink the train tracks so that no one could get injured. It began in 1937 using plans that had been around forever, it seemed, at least 25 years. And using those plans, they just lowered the grade level using federal money, which was garnered because Harold Ickes was the Secretary of the Interior in the FDR government, and he was from Winnetka. They finished it in June of 1943. Other communities, including Glencoe in particular, wanted to have below grade train tracks, but they couldn't find the money once the Depression came, and so it never came to fruition. Now, one of the biggest things about the North Shore is that most of it is dry, or was dry, until the 1970s, and that's the result of the efforts of the lady who lived in this beautiful Carpenter Gothic building on our left-hand side. It was Frances Willard. The Frances Willard House today is in Evanston. It's on a parcel that's a National Historic Register district. There are 5 buildings. There's the archives, there's the offices, and you're welcome to schedule. They have tours. Her efforts she was the president of the WCTU from 1879 onward until her death. And they were very effective, as was Northwestern University, which did not want its students to be drinking and thought they had the right to tell any suburb within a mile of their border, of the Evanston border, that they couldn't have alcohol. There is no law that allows them to do that, but most of the towns followed suit and were dry, with the exception of 3 different places. There are stories about how alcohol was served. It was considered to be a low class, always drinking, all the stereotypes of wet towns. And that included the Plaza del Lago, which was initially put up in 1928 as both a shopping center, but also there was a ballroom and there were shops and they had places to drink. It was allowed because this was in no man's land. There was no zoning from anybody. They were on their own, and the no zoning stayed until the 1950s when this area was annexed to Wilmette. Another area that was where drinking was allowed was Grosse Pointe, and the picture is again of the Grosse Pointe Village Hall, which is in the upper right, just under the beer glass. Grosse Pointe was a town that was created in the 1870s, 1874. It's the town of German immigrants who are agricultural workers who gave the name to the township. They named it New Trier after the town they came from in Germany, Trier. And they subsisted on the fact that they had 5 bars in town who paid municipal taxes. Well, their success was also their downfall, because the township flourished and other towns were founded in the township. And in 1909, there was a township-wide referendum that said, are we going to be dry or are we going to be wet? And even though Grosse Pointe was a place where everybody enjoyed a good beer on Sundays, The rest of the township voted to be dry, and Grosse Pointe goes out of existence because its municipal revenues are shuttered. They closed down in the beginning in 1909. By 1923, they sell the village hall, and that is this building, which today is the home of the Wilmette Historical Society, who has great exhibits. Lovely place to visit. And then finally, this is a corner in Highwood. Highwood was founded in 1887. It's across the street on the tracks from Fort Sheridan. The fact that it's there allowed a lot of people to open up bars that the soldiers used to like. It was the only place on the North Shore until the 1970s where you could go have a decent dinner and a drink with your dinner. Lots of people from the dry towns of Winnetka, Wilmette, Glencoe, Highland Park flocked to Highwood. In the 1920s, they were known for what are called blind pigs, which were the illegal places. Highwood has tried to tamp down its reputation as a wild and woolly alcohol-laden place, but it also has kept its reputation as one of the best restaurant towns on the shore, even after everybody else passed ordinances allowing drinking. All right, the Great Train Robbery. I just read in the paper that they are now robbing trains of packages that are supposed to be delivered by Amazon. So this may not be the greatest train robbery ever, as it is touted on this sign. This is right outside of Lake Bluff. It's in a town called Roundout, and it's the Roundout train robbery, which was a heist in June of 1924. $3 million was at stake. So, okay, what you're looking at on the right-hand side is a mail train car. In other words, in that car is where they are sorting the mail and anything that is being shipped. Among the things that were being shipped at the time was $3 million in jewelry, stocks and bonds, and cash. Well, there was a Texas train robbery gang by the name of the Newton brothers. There were 5 brothers, and they hooked up with a bunch of locals in Chicago and concocted a plan whereby they were going to take that $3 million off the train. It was an inside job. The locals here worked for the railroad, and they got 3 of the Newton brothers onto the train, hiding in the mail car before the car took off from Chicago. Once they passed the Chicago city limits, the 3 guys popped out with a gun or 2 and said, okay, this is a robbery. We want everything you've got. A scuffle ensued and a gun went off. At the time, people were uncertain, but it seems in the research that one of the Newton brothers, Willie, shot himself. In any event, Willie got shot, and remember this because that's how the police are going to solve the crime. Anyway, the $3 million in cash and bonds and stuff were put in some sacks, and the train rolls out, and right past Lake Bluff, they stop at the stop in Roundout, where they are met by the rest of the gang in 4 different Cadillacs. I love that they point out Cadillac cars to take the loot and be gone. They leave the train and they go. The police were not stupid. They went right after. They just followed the blood. They followed Willie to where he got sewn up by a doctor. The doctor turned him in, and all 8 guys who were involved in the robbery went to jail. But the exciting part about this is that there's $1 million that's still missing. They only recovered 2 of the $3 million, and nobody seems to know why. Okay, film locations. My husband finds this weird that people want to look at places that they have seen in the movies, but they certainly do. You don't have to consider yourself weird if you're one of those. We appreciate it. In this particular case, I've got Home Alone on the left-hand side, which is the most important and the most common one. After Richard told me that he thought it was odd that people wanted to see the house. We went by to take this picture, and we found 3 groups of people standing there taking pictures. I think that's because Home Alone is shown annually at Christmas time, and people have it in their hearts. It's a beloved place. Anyway, the house was used primarily for exterior shots and some interiors, but you should know that most of what was done interiorly was done in a set that was built on the New Trier High School, New Trier West High School gymnasium. New Trier West was closed at the point that the film was made in 1990, and they built a secondary location so they could shoot from the top and from the sides, places that you can't get to if you are inside. The family lived in this house. The family that rented it out lived in it. It's big enough that they lived in the back. And it is a place of I guess idol worship, idol vision. Anyway, if you go by, you'll meet some other folks who are also interested. 2 other places that are Glencoe related. The top one is the Glencoe Union Church, which is where the wedding of Molly Ringwald's sister in 16 Candles was held. The wedding was what upset Molly Ringwald because nobody remembered her 16th birthday. And the lower picture is from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It's the Stan Schumann overlook at the Glencoe Beach. The obscure, something you might not heard of or didn't know about or was somehow concealed or hidden. So the first one is the Potawatomi influence, and I'm not sure that this is as hidden as it was when I even started writing the book back a year and a half ago, but our indigenous heritage here goes back to the Council of Three Fires, the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi. And the tribe of the Potawatomi are the ones who are here. And I notice I misspelled Potawatomi there on the left-hand side. I apologize for that. It's got an extra T in it. There are a couple of places where you can learn about this. One is, of course, is the Mitchell Museum of the American Indian, which has fabulous permanent exhibit that talks about the Indians of this area. But it also has lots more, and they always have traveling exhibits. But the other one that you may not know about is the Wilmette family plaque, which is in Gilson Park in Wilmette on the north end. It is in honor of the Wilmette family. The woman who is the mother in this case, Archange Wilmette, and her children are the important ones. Archange Wilmette and her sister were Potawatomis who worked with and for the soldiers at Fort Dearborn, which is why we think they were granted 1,280 acres in the 1829 Treaty of Prairie du Chien. The other place you can find out about the Potawatomi is at the Kent Fuller Air Station Prairie in Glenview, where they have the Tyner Interpretation Center. And as you can see from the placard in the middle, they talk about who lived here. These are the Woodlands Indians that are the ones who lived around here. Notice they don't have the big head feathers, and they are dressed in much more than just a loincloth, which is the typical stereotypic Indian dress. Now, there are two areas where we honor veterans that you may not be aware of. One is the Glenview Naval Air Station Museum, and I will tell you, I think this is obscure because it took us 3 times to get in there. It's a very hidden place off of Lehigh Road in Glenview, next behind an auto repair shop and something else. So it's a real hidden corner of the world. It's also a museum that I called Chock-a-Block in the book because they've just got everything and anything that anybody ever brought them about the Glenview Naval Air Station thrown around in there. Anybody who ever made a model airplane, there are tables full of model airplanes. And as you can see, there are lots of uniforms on these mannequins. One of the uniforms is on the front piece of the book. The other are what are called Blue Star Memorials, and they exist in Wilmette, Deerfield, Northbrook, and Evanston. This one's the one in Evanston. After World War II, the Garden Clubs of America decided that they did not want to try and do a monument to the war. They would have little gardens all the way around the country. And after 1955, it's all Americans who are fighting in all wars, not just World War II. And so you'll see these little placards in places where there is nice vegetation and gardens. Now, two of the places that I think may not be as well known as, unless you live in Lake Forest or Evanston, but one is Dave's Rock Shop, which is in Evanston and is known for some of its very interesting rocks. It's also got a museum in the basement, all about the geologic development of this area. Then we have in the upper corner, the North Shore Exchange, which used to be, in Glencoe at least, the thrift shop, but has been taken over first by the Women's Club and now by an independent not-for-profit organization, turned into the Exchange, where they only take on consignment, upscale designer wear and furniture, and they have made millions, literally, which is given to charity annually. And then the bottom is Market Square. You may or may not have been here, but I don't know if you know this. This is the first automobile shopping mall in the United States, designed by George Mayer. And this is one of the towers and the fountain. But this is the idea that you bring your car and you drive up, and there is a mall that you can walk in and shop at. Also kind of obscure, sitting in plain sight, are two new towns. One of them is Fort Sheridan, which was from the conversion of the Army base in 1993. Went on the National Register in 1974. This is a former officer's building and now a private home, but there are lots of stables that have been made into townhouses and barracks that have been made into condos, and the whole place is now called the town of Fort Sheridan. The other new town is the Glen. I'm sure you're aware of shopping at the Glen, and you may have seen the statue that's in downtown. But this is a 1,121 acre property that was converted from the Glenview Naval Air Base when it closed in 1993. It brought 5,000 new residents to Glenview, 5,000 full-time jobs, and increased their tax base by 35%. This is the Daggett Cemetery, often overlooked. It's on the curve of one of the curves of Sheridan Road. I think Glencoe considers this one of theirs, but actually it's in Moraine Township in Lake County, and they are the people who did the restoration in 1996 to bring this cemetery back. This is a pioneer cemetery. Robert Daggett arrived in 1837 and bought 160 acres of land to do farming. 1/2 acre of that was set aside in the 1840s because of some tragedies in his life. His daughters, Anne and Rachel, Anne was 12, Rachel was 21, died from quick consumption, today what we would call tuberculosis. In 1845 and 1847, his son James in 1848, who was 18, was injured and died by a falling tree. So the pioneer lifestyle is shown very dramatically in the fact that within a period of 5 years, this man lost 3 children. The cemetery is still used. The Dennis family, the Dennis Booth family is a prominent group, and it's open to the public. You can just walk right in. And interestingly, a lot of these stones are written in German because of the German origin of the settlers who came to either Glencoe or Highland Park. Now, here's the natural. These are either trails, highways, bikeways, prairies. And the first one is a magnificent area called the Grove. It's on the National Register of Historic Places. This is the Interpretation Center where you meet the turtles are live. There's a little zoo there. Obviously the bear is stuffed. But there's a schoolhouse, and then there's the home of John and Robert Kennicott. John Kennicott is the first settler in 1836, and he's the promoter of the idea of the land grant college, which is interesting. His son Robert made an even bigger splash. He becomes the state's first naturalist. He helps found Chicago's Academy of Science, the Northwestern Museum of Natural History, and he scopes out Alaska prior to the United States purchasing it in the 1860s. This is a fascinating place. They've got lots to see. They have women who, well, men too, I guess, but who dress up in the outfits of the 1860s to take you through the house. The trails are gorgeous. It is a wonderful place to visit. There are other prairies and savannas and trails, however. The one on the right-hand side here is the Tyner Nature Center. That's the one with the green roof. It's a sustainable building in the Kent Fuller Air Station Prairie. And the Kent Fuller Prairie is an interesting one in that these are the original prairie plantings. Nothing has been done to them. When the air station was developed, they just laid tar on top of it, and every year they mowed the lawn. And by mowing the lawn, rather than putting any weed killer or anything on it, the original plantings, seeds were kept in the ground. And so when they took the air station runways away, everything just popped up. This is a unique remnant of the original prairies that the settlers who came in the 1830s would have seen with their own eyes. And this is a path through it. It's hard to visualize, but this stuff is close to my eye height. I'm short, I know, but it's really tall stuff. The other is the preserve in Highland Park, which is on the other extreme. This was a golf course, and now they're bringing it back to be a prairie and a preserve. It's only 2 years old. This is a section of the area where they teach children about mounds and what lives there. They have a maze, which I think in 20 years will be fabulous. Right now, it's about 5 inches tall for each of the plantings. The Skokie Lagoons, which of course Glencoe residents would be very aware of, but I don't know if you know that this is the best place in northern Illinois to fish for big mouth bass. The picture on the right-hand side is the boat rental that is in Glencoe. On the left-hand side is a guy fishing off the dam, which is in Winnetka. The lagoons were formed in the 1930s by the Civilian Conservation Corps. Again, Harold Ickes was the Secretary of the Interior. They formed the CCC as a New Deal project. He brings one of those CCC camps here to our area, and they dig out the lagoons that connect. This is actually the middle fork of the north branch of the Chicago River. There are Jens Jensen parks. You may or may not know that Jens Jensen was the leading prairie architect of the period. The one on the left it's in a park called Jens Jensen Park in Highland Park. It is the big stone in the middle is a memorial to Augusta Rosenwald. She was married to Julius Rosenwald, who was the president of Sears Roebuck. They were both known as philanthropists. Augusta wrote her own checks and did her own charitable work, and it was prodigious. Among other things, she supported prairie plantings and was a big supporter of Jensen. The bigger picture in the middle is a Jensen Park construction. in Kenilworth, which is kind of an unusual park because the park is bisected by Sheridan Road. Half of it's on either side. It was created as Mahoney Park and Wildlife and Bird Sanctuary in 1933. Both of these are what are called council rings, which was a signature of Jensen in his parks. Sit down, relax, talk. The other two are specialty gardens, both of them in Evanston. The Merrick Rose Garden below is where you will find Fountain Square, the Fountain Square fountain, which is kind of an ironic thing in Evanston. They have Fountain Square, but there's no fountain. What happened to the fountain? Well, it ended up in the Merrick Rose Garden. And there you can see all sorts of kinds of roses that are planted annually by the Rose Garden Association of the United States. On the far right is William Shakespeare looking down at his garden, which is kept on the campus of Northwestern University and has the plantings of all of his plays. They took out the names and planted those plants. Okay, the wonderful. This is my favorite. Beautiful, awesome, artistic, architectural, or historic. So we'll start with some art. This is the Thayer Avenue garage doors in Evanston. In 2019, a woman by the name of Teresa Perrode painted all the garage doors in the 2300 to 2400 blocks of the alley behind Thayer Avenue. And it is a drive-through art gallery. So just get in your car, find Thayer Avenue, go back into the alley, and there you are. It is a pleasure to look at animals, flowers, and birds. Then there are the architectural gems. The Baha'i Temple, I don't think it's secret to anybody, but I thought you might like to know that the secret of the Baha'i Temple is that there are crystals in the precast concrete panels that made this building possible. It's one of 9 in the world, and of course it is beautiful. They invite you in, you can go into the sanctuary and just think, relax, enjoy. The other picture here is of the Mormon Temple in Glenview. And the Mormons do not allow non-Mormons into their religious institutions, but their gardens are open. So you're welcome to go visit and walk around, look at the garden, but also at the building. And the building is noted for the 6 towers that are there. And the fellow who is standing on the top tower in the upper right-hand corner is the angel Moroni, who is the one who called people to find the tablets that set up the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which we commonly call the Mormons. Now, church windows is what wowed me. I don't know if they wow you, but you can take a quick look at the Lily Reed Holt Chapel in Lake Forest, which is on the left, which has a triptych of Louis Comfort Tiffany. It's a design based on the concept of peace. Or you can go below at the Kenilworth Union Church, which is an 1892 building that's been redone and added on to. But the interesting things about it is that it is the first non-denominational church in America, and the windows encompass all the denominations that the church encompasses, including this one, which is about Swedenborgianism, which was the religion of Joseph Sears, the founder of Kenilworth, as well as Daniel Burnham. And then finally, on the right-hand side, a beautiful window in the modernist style. In other words, it's not figurative, and it shines into Alice Millar Chapel on the Northwestern campus. There are lots of things by famous artists along the North Shore. In Glencoe, there is a subdivision called Ravine Bluffs, where 5 buildings plus a larger homestead have been built. This is the marker into Ravine Bluffs. There are 3 of these that Frank Lloyd Wright did. All of that contributes to the fact that Glencoe has the 3rd largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright works in the world, after Oak Park and Chicago. Dwight Perkins, and Errol Saarinen, who worked together on Crow Island School. This is the Crow Island mascot. The school itself is unique in how it is sized for the children who are in there. Each classroom has an opening to the outside, so the outside and the inside are utilized equally, and lots of other things. It is a landmark building that is known nationwide as one of the best educational structures. But then again, we also have the John Van Bergen Braeside School, which is built on a ravine in Highland Park. And it's also in the prairie style that Perkins and Saarinen had used, even though this is built in the 20s, by which time the prairie style was supposed to have disappeared. But it's a beautiful building. You can walk around it on the weekends without problem. Environmentally sustainable architecture, something I'm very much into. These two buildings are noted for two different things. One, they are both net zero carbon footprint. That means they produce their own energy. You can't see it in the pictures because I don't have a drone, but they've got on the rooftop, they've got power sources that are taking source from the sun. Each of them is built with recycled materials. In the case of the Reconstructionist Temple, it's mostly wood. In the case of the Technique Prairie Facility Center, it's a kind of a funny word. It's a fitness center. It's also that brown is also wood. And each of them was done by a woman architect. So on the left, the Jewish Reconstructionist Temple is by Carol Ross Marney. And on the right, Technique by Lois Witt from a firm that is in the suburbs. It's kind of amazing with that the forefront is being done by women. We do have Black history on the North Shore, even though I don't think our image says that. When you think of North Shore image, it's usually white and affluent. But there were Black communities in Lake Forest on the left. The first Black community was started in 1834. And the AME Church was founded not much after that. But the AME Church has been shuttered, and there is no AME Church anymore. Instead, there is the First Baptist Church, which opened in 1900. And doesn't that look like a New England schoolhouse? But it actually is the Black church, and it's located very close to downtown Lake Forest. On the other side, what looks like a library is almost a library. This is what's called the Shorefront Legacy Center, and it is founded by a guy by the name of Dino Robinson, who made it his life's work to collect, index, inventory, scan, digitize, and preserve the Black history of the North Shore. I have to admit, it's primarily Evanston, but they've got all kinds of things. And there's a prom dress from a Jack and Jill's organization prom right next to the church files from the First Baptist Church of Glencoe, which was there for such a short time. We don't even think about it most of the time, to the mammoth files of people who have worked in Evanston on either in the churches or in government. It's a fabulous place. The Shorefront Legacy is in the basement of a church in Evanston and is available for research. Okay, quickly, we've got the performing arts on the shore, the Actors Gymnasium in Evanston I talked about. Of course, we know the Writers Theater in Glencoe, which is an architecturally significant building by Jeannie Gang. And then gastronomically, what I picked were the restaurants that have been here the longest and are kind of hole-in-the-wall joints, one of which is very much involved with Glencoe. Charlie Beinlich and his wife were Glencoe residents. You couldn't drink in Glencoe. You go across the what is now the highway, but you just go over to the main road, which is where there was no zoning from Northbrook or Glencoe, and they opened up a tap, and it became a place where you could get a drink and something to eat. Today, they're famous for their shrimp cocktail, among other things. Mustard's Last Stand stands in for all of the hot dog stands along the North Shore, but this one, the owner was inducted into the Vienna Hall of Fame as Mr. Hot Dog, so I thought it was one of the best ones. And Hackney's, of course, famous for hamburgers and onion brick, which they invented. And finally, those two handsome gentlemen are my grandsons enjoying an apple pancake at the Pancake House. Just because I'm doing this in Glencoe, I pulled out the other things that I didn't mention in the general, but included in the book is a small portion on the Green Bay Trail, which is the upper picture. Going clockwise, the North Shore Congregation Israel, which has both the Minoru Yamasaki Sanctuary on the upper left and the lower, the Thomas Beebe Annex. And then, of course, dear to my own heart is the Ravine Bluffs Cottage and Ravine Bluffs Park, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright construction that the Glencoe Historical Society has recently saved from destruction. And then greetings from Glencoe. This is the Kirk Tyke House, the man who invented the postcard with the bubble letters, just like this, but for every town in the United States. And there's lots more. If you have any other ideas, if you think I made mistakes, I welcome you to email me. If you have any questions, you can certainly let me know. And I appreciate your listening and coming to the Glencoe Public Library for this talk. Thanks, Grace.
Thank you very much, Ellen. This is so interesting. I have lived around here for 20 years and I learned a lot. I think you're going to help anyone who watches this look at the area with fresh eyes and want to appreciate and explore our region more. I know I will. Again, the name of Ellen's book is Secrets of the North Shore Chicago, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. And it's a great book. You can get it at your local library, or you can buy a copy of it. We have a purchase link that we're emailing to everyone who gets this video through the bookstall, so you're welcome to use that as well. Thank you so much, Ellen Schubart, and it was a pleasure having you back.
Thank you very much, Grace. Pleasure to be here.
We look forward to the next one.
Okay. Thanks.
So long.
Bye-bye.